In the silence of the universe, there is a rhythm, a pulse that connects stars and atoms, ice and fire, past and future. Here, we follow that pulse through cosmic webs, frozen ages, and the mysteries that shape existence. This is the Science Pulse, where wonder meets knowledge and the universe tells its story. The world was colder once, not just by seasons, not just by years, but by entire ages. 20,000 years ago, Earth lay beneath a mantle of silence and ice, a planet reshaped by cold. From the poles, glaciers advanced like slow armies, vast and crushing, stretching for thousands of kilometers. Mountains vanished beneath their weight, valleys filled with frozen rivers that creaked and groaned as they moved. Entire continents gleamed white, their bones hidden beneath sheets of ice more than 3 kilometers thick. But the Ice Age was not only ice. Between the glaciers lay immense plains, the mammoth steppe, a land of endless winds and pale grasses, home to creatures that now exist only as ghosts in our imagination. Woolly mammoths trudged across the frost, tusks gleaming in the dim light. Saber-toothed cats stalked silently through the shadows. Herds of bison thundered across frozen ground, their breath rising in clouds that vanished into the winter air. And among them walked humans, fragile, clever, resilient, wrapped in the skins of animals, carrying fire against the dark. They hunted, gathered, painted the walls of caves with visions of the world they knew. They lived at the mercy of ice, yet they endured. This was a world of extremes, brutal cold and fragile warmth, desolation and abundance, extinction and survival. A world where the balance of life and death shifted with each heartbeat of the glaciers. And it is a world that shaped us. The Ice Age carved the Earth we know today. It carved us too, pressing humanity into something new, something enduring. To understand ourselves, we must return to that frozen world, to the age of silence, of giants, of ice, a frozen world. The Earth of 20,000 years ago was gripped by a silence deeper than anything we know today. It was not the silence of peace, but the silence of a world subdued, muffled beneath the weight of ice. Vast ice sheets blanketed the northern continents, pressing down with unimaginable weight, their frozen surfaces reflecting the pale light of a weaker sun. From Greenland to the British Isles, from Scandinavia to Siberia, from the Arctic Circle across the heart of North America, the land lay buried. In some places, the ice was so thick it would have swallowed the tallest mountains, leaving only ridges and peaks like jagged islands in a frozen sea. The planet itself had shifted. The global temperature was 5 to 10 degrees colder than it is now. A difference that reshaped everything. Oceans shrank, locked away in the frozen expanses, lowering sea levels by over 100 meters. Vast new lands emerged where water had retreated, exposing the hidden bones of the continents. Where today, the Bering Strait divides Asia from North America, there was once a bridge of land and tundra, a passage across which herds of animals and the first human hunters would move. Where Southeast Asia is now a scattering of islands, there stretched a vast connected shelf, dry and walkable. Even the Mediterranean and the coasts of Africa looked different. Their shorelines extended far beyond the reach of modern tides. The air itself was different, colder, drier, harsher. Dust blew across continents, carried by winds unbroken by forests, for trees had retreated before the cold. Deserts expanded under thin skies. Grasslands spread in sweeping arcs, their tough stems bent under icy winds, stretching farther than the eye could see. It was a world pared down to its essentials: ice, stone, wind, and life clinging where it could. And yet, for all its starkness, this frozen world was not lifeless. Beneath the glaciers, rivers forced their way through tunnels of ice, roaring meltwater that carved valleys into the rock. Where the sheets ended, they dropped walls of ice into the sea, birthing icebergs that cracked and tumbled with thunder. South of the glaciers, the land was alive with herds and predators, their migrations shaped by the rhythm of ice. The world pulsed, slowly, like a sleeping giant. The glaciers themselves were restless things, though their motion was too slow for the eye to see. Over centuries they advanced, creeping across valleys, grinding mountains down to rubble. Rocks caught in their bellies scraped the land beneath, etching grooves and scars that would last long after the ice was gone. When they melted, they left behind lakes and rivers, the fingerprints of their passing, the landscapes of North America and Europe today, the Great Lakes, the fjords of Norway, the rolling plains, were all carved by the weight of that ice. It is almost impossible to imagine the scale of it. Stand at the edge of a modern glacier, and you see a wall of ice, blue and ancient, rising above you. Now imagine that wall stretching not for kilometers, but across entire horizons, thicker than mountains, older than empires. Imagine the sound of it groaning as it shifts, cracking as it calves, grinding as it moves. That was the reality of Earth during the Ice Age, a planet sculpted not by rivers or winds alone, but by vast, slow engines of frozen stone. Even the seas were different. With so much water locked away in glaciers, coastlines extended outward like long scars. Islands connected to continents, continents to one another. The world was stitched together differently, its pathways altered by ice. Migration routes opened where oceans once were. Ecosystems shifted, adapted, transformed. The animals of this world were wanderers of wide plains and long distances, their paths written by the shape of land and the advance of ice. The sky itself bore witness to this frozen age. Winters were brutal, stretching longer than summers. Snow piled endlessly in the northern latitudes, rarely melting, layer upon layer compressing into ice. Summers brought little relief, short seasons of muted warmth. Even the tropics felt the difference. Their rains diminished, their forests thinner. Across the globe, life adjusted to a rhythm colder and harsher than anything we know today. But it was not only the climate and land that were changed. Humanity itself was reshaped by the Ice Age. Though fragile in body, humans proved astonishingly resilient. They learned to follow herds across frozen plains, to build shelters from bone and hide, to carry fire against the endless dark. They moved in small bands, carving out existence at the edge of glaciers, painting their visions of animals onto stone walls deep within caves. The Ice Age demanded everything of them, and in return, it forged ingenuity, cooperation, imagination. The frozen world was both enemy and teacher. It pressed life into new forms, rewarded adaptation, punished weakness. Species thrived that could endure cold and scarcity. Mammoths with thick coats, bison with powerful shoulders, reindeer with hooves that could break frozen ground. Those that could not adapt vanished into extinction. Evolution quickened under the pressure of ice, and in its crucible, humanity too was tested. To stand in that world would have been to stand in a place both beautiful and brutal. the air sharp with frost, the horizon broken by walls of ice, the land vast and empty yet alive with movement. It was a world poised between survival and silence, every moment fragile, every breath a defiance of the cold, a world alien, and yet the world that made us. The frozen age was not eternal. Even as glaciers advanced, they would one day retreat, but in their time, they defined the earth. They carved its mountains, drew its rivers, wrote its coastlines. They shaped the destinies of creatures great and small, and they left behind scars we still see today. To understand our planet, we must walk through that frozen world. And to understand ourselves, we must remember that we were born in its shadow. The mammoth steppe, beyond the walls of ice, stretching across continents, lay one of the most extraordinary ecosystems the planet has ever known. It was neither tundra nor desert, nor forest nor savanna, but something different, something unique to the Ice Age. Scientists call it the mammoth steppe, a vast expanse of cold grassland that girdled the northern hemisphere, sweeping from the Atlantic coasts of Europe across Siberia to the plains of North America. It was the largest biome on Earth, a single unbroken belt of windswept prairie stitched together by frost and sky. Here, life thrived in astonishing abundance. Though the world was colder, drier, harsher, the mammoth steppe supported a richness of species unmatched by most modern ecosystems. Grasses, sedges, and herbs dominated the land, their roots plunging deep into frozen soil, toughened against the relentless winds. It was not a land of trees. Forests had retreated before the ice, but a land of open horizons, where visibility stretched for kilometers, where predators and prey could see one another long before they met. And yet, it was far from empty. The namesake of this steppe roamed its plains in herds that shook the earth. The woolly mammoth, great shaggy beasts with curving tusks and coats as thick as the snowdrifts, moved slowly but purposefully across the land. They were creatures perfectly adapted to the cold, small ears to preserve heat, layers of fat beneath their fur, and teeth made for grinding the coarse grasses of the steppe. Their presence defined the ecosystem, shaping the land as they grazed, carving trails into the frozen soil, scattering dung that fertilized the grasses, sustaining the very world they walked upon. Alongside them roamed woolly rhinoceroses, armored in fur and horn, pushing through snowdrifts to graze. Herds of bison thundered across the plains, their dark shapes silhouetted against the pale horizon. Wild horses galloped in groups, their manes stiff with frost. Musk oxen and reindeer pressed on through the winds, feeding in shallow pits they dug into snow. Longer than summers. Snow piled endlessly in the northern latitudes, rarely melting, layer upon layer compressing into ice. Summers brought little relief, short seasons of muted warmth. Even the tropics felt the difference. Their rains diminished, their forests thinner. Across the globe, life adjusted to a rhythm colder and harsher than anything we know today. But it was not only the climate and land that were changed. Humanity itself was reshaped by the Ice Age. Though fragile in body, humans proved astonishingly resilient. They learned to follow herds across frozen plains, to build shelters from bone and hide, to carry fire against the endless dark. They moved in small bands, carving out existence at the edge of glaciers, painting their visions of animals onto stone walls deep within caves. The Ice Age demanded everything of them, and in return, it forged ingenuity, cooperation, imagination. The frozen world was both enemy and teacher. It pressed life into new forms, rewarded adaptation, punished weakness. Species thrived that could endure cold and scarcity. Mammoths with thick coats, bison with powerful shoulders, reindeer with hooves that could break frozen ground. Those that could not adapt vanished into extinction. Evolution quickened under the pressure of ice, and in its crucible, humanity too was tested. To stand in that world would have been to stand in a place both beautiful and brutal. The air sharp with frost, the horizon broken by walls of ice, the land vast and empty yet alive with movement. It was a world poised between survival and silence, every moment fragile, every breath a defiance of the cold, a world alien, and yet the world that made us. The frozen age was not eternal. Even as glaciers advanced, they would one day retreat. But in their time, they defined the earth. They carved its mountains, drew its rivers, wrote its coastlines. They shaped the destinies of creatures great and small, and they left behind scars we still see today. To understand our planet, we must walk through that frozen world. And to understand ourselves, we must remember that we were born in its shadow. The mammoth steppe, beyond the walls of ice, stretching across continents, lay one of the most extraordinary ecosystems the planet has ever known. It was neither tundra nor desert, nor forest nor savanna, but something different, something unique to the Ice Age. Scientists call it the mammoth steppe, a vast expanse of cold grassland that girdled the northern hemisphere, sweeping from the Atlantic coasts of Europe across Siberia to the plains of North America. It was the largest biome on Earth, a single unbroken belt of windswept prairie stitched together by frost and sky. Here, life thrived in astonishing abundance. Though the world was colder, drier, harsher, the mammoth steppe supported a richness of species unmatched by most modern ecosystems. Grasses, sedges, and herbs dominated the land, their roots plunging deep into frozen soil, toughened against the relentless winds. It was not a land of trees. Forests had retreated before the ice, but a land of open horizons, where visibility stretched for kilometers, where predators and prey could see one another long before they met. And yet, it was far from empty. The namesake of this steppe roamed its plains in herds that shook the earth. The woolly mammoth, great shaggy beasts with curving tusks and coats as thick as the snowdrifts, moved slowly but purposefully across the land. They were creatures perfectly adapted to the cold, small ears to preserve heat, layers of fat beneath their fur, and teeth made for grinding the coarse grasses of the steppe. Their presence defined the ecosystem, shaping the land as they grazed, carving trails into the frozen soil, scattering dung that fertilized the grasses, sustaining the very world they walked upon. Alongside them roamed woolly rhinoceroses, armored in fur and horn, pushing through snowdrifts to graze. Herds of bison thundered across the plains, their dark shapes silhouetted against the pale horizon. Wild horses galloped in groups, their manes stiff with frost. Musk oxen and reindeer pressed on through the winds, feeding in shallow pits they dug into snow. These herbivores, vast in number, supported a food chain rich with predators. Among them stalked the great hunters of the Ice Age. Saber-toothed cats lay in wait, their fangs glinting as they struck at weakened prey. Lions larger than any alive today prowled the steppes, masters of ambush and chase. Packs of dire wolves, heavier and stronger than their modern descendants, coursed across the land, their howls carried by the wind. Even bears grew to monstrous size. Cave bears in Europe, short-faced bears in the Americas, towering over humans who dared approach them, and above all of them, circling in the sky or watching from shadow, was a new predator: us. Humans moved across the mammoth steppe with tools of stone, fire carried in embers, knowledge passed in whispers and drawings. To them, the steppe was both a land of promise and peril. Its herds meant food, clothing, shelter, and tools. Its predators meant danger, death, or rivalry. Survival required cunning, cooperation, and courage. The steppe itself was not static. Seasons transformed it utterly. In winter, the land was locked in ice, grasses buried beneath snow. The sun, a pale circle lingering low on the horizon. Herds moved slowly, conserving energy, their breath rising in clouds. Predators grew lean, following tracks across endless snowfields. In summer, the transformation was sudden and startling. The ice retreated, the grasses grew thick, flowers burst into color, insects swarmed in the brief warmth. Life surged in a frenzy, feeding and breeding before the cold returned. For a few short months, the mammoth steppe was alive with abundance, a world of bloom framed by frost. What made this steppe extraordinary was not only its size, but its resilience. Unlike modern tundra, poor in nutrients and dominated by moss, the mammoth steppe was fertile. Its soils, enriched by the constant cycling of grazing and trampling, supported an abundance of grasses that could feed vast herds. In this frozen world, grass was life, and everything: mammoth, bison, horse, wolf, cat, and human depended on it. Yet it was fragile, balanced on the edge of climate. The same cold that sustained it also threatened it. If the ice advanced too far, the grasses withered beneath glaciers. If the climate warmed too much, shrubs and trees crept in, breaking the openness. The mammoth steppe existed in a narrow window of possibility, a biome forged by the Ice Age and destined to vanish with its end. Still, in its time, it was a world of wonders. Imagine standing on a ridge, gazing across the horizon. Herds of mammoth and bison move in the distance, their silhouettes rising like a mirage. A lion stalks them, hidden in the grasses. Above, ravens circle, waiting for the aftermath of the hunt. The wind carries the scent of cold earth, the tang of snow, the musk of animals. The land feels endless, alive, and dangerous. This was the mammoth steppe, a frozen Eden, a world both harsh and abundant, where giants roamed and life flourished against the odds. It is gone now, vanished with the retreat of the ice, leaving only fragments in the tundras and steppes of today. But in bones buried deep in permafrost, in cave paintings etched by human hands, in stories whispered through generations, the mammoth steppe still lives. It was the beating heart of the Ice Age, the land that fed giants, the stage upon which humanity learned to endure. Humans in the ice. Amid the giants of the Ice Age, the mammoths, the lions, the rhinoceroses, moved a smaller, quieter figure. Fragile in body, slow compared to the beasts, lacking claws or fangs, yet armed with something no other creature possessed. This was humanity, still scattered across continents, still learning to shape the world, but already carrying the spark that would allow them to survive where even titans fell. The Ice Age was not simply the backdrop of human existence. It was the crucible in which humanity was forged. The world they entered was harsh. Winters stretched long and merciless, the cold biting through bone and skin. Food was uncertain, dependent on the migrations of herds and the luck of the hunt. Predators prowled, larger and stronger than humans, always watching. And yet, humans endured. They learned to clothe themselves in the hides of the animals they killed, stitching furs into armor against the wind. They raised walls of mammoth bone and hide, creating homes that stood against the storms. Their tools were crude by our measure, but ingenious in their time. Stone blades shaped with patience and skill cut hides, carved wood, butchered prey. Spears tipped with flint became humans gathered in small bands, families linked by blood and necessity, sharing food, shelter, and labor. Cooperation was essential. No single human could face the ice alone. Around fires, they told stories, taught skills, passed knowledge from one generation to the next. In those gatherings, the first flickers of culture were born, the invisible threads that bound them together as surely as the filaments of the cosmic web bound galaxies. The Ice Age tested imagination as much as endurance. In caves across Europe, deep in the earth, humans painted the walls with images of animals: mammoths, bison, lions, horses, creatures they depended on and revered. These paintings were not mere decorations, they were expressions of meaning in a world of struggle, visions that carried memory, belief, and hope. To stand in the flickering light of a torch and see those painted beasts move across stone must have been to glimpse something greater. The first stirrings of art, of spirit, of humanity seeing itself within the world. The glaciers shaped not only landscapes, but journeys. As sea levels dropped, new paths opened. The Bering Land Bridge stretched between Asia and North America, a frozen corridor of grass and tundra. Across it moved animals, mammoths, bison, horses, and following them, humans. These first migrations carried people into new continents, into lands no human had seen before, lands that would become their home. From the mammoth steppe of Siberia to the vast plains of the Americas, humanity spread, guided by the rhythm of ice. Yet survival was never certain. Entire groups vanished when food ran out, when predators struck, when winters grew too long. Disease and hunger took their toll. The Ice Age was not a time of security, but of constant challenge. Each generation had to learn anew the skills of survival: how to track, how to hunt, how to endure. And with each challenge, humanity grew stronger, more adaptable, more inventive. It is easy to see the Ice Age as alien, a world of beasts and glaciers far removed from us. But in truth, it is the world that made us. The pressure of cold and scarcity demanded ingenuity. The vastness of the plains demanded cooperation. The danger of predators demanded courage. In firelight and frost, in hardship and endurance, humanity became what it is. We are children of the ice as much as of the sun. When the glaciers finally retreated, when the world warmed and the steppe gave way to forests, humans carried with them the lessons of that frozen age. They carried fire and art, tools and memory, imagination and resilience. They carried the knowledge that survival is not given but earned, that life endures through adaptation, that even in the harshest world, meaning can be made. The Ice Age was a world of giants, but it was also a world of beginnings. And though the giants have gone, though the glaciers have melted, the traces of that time remain in us, in our stories, in our art, in our very bones. We are, all of us, survivors of the ice, the glacial sculptors. The Ice Age was not only a time of cold, of mammoths and hunters and endless grasslands. It was also an age of transformation, when the earth itself was reshaped by forces so vast and slow they seemed eternal. The glaciers, those rivers of frozen stone, were not still. They were sculptors, patient, relentless, and unimaginably powerful. Over tens of thousands of years, they carved valleys, ground down mountains, and redrew the outlines of continents. The world we know today, its lakes, its plains, its fjords and cliffs, is the legacy of their chisel. Imagine a wall of ice hundreds of meters high, stretching across the horizon. To the human eye, it seems motionless, a frozen wall that will never move. Yet beneath the surface, the glacier creeps. Its weight is crushing, its base grinding rock into powder as it slides forward centimeter by centimeter. Trapped stones in its belly gouge deep lines into the land, dragging across bedrock with the force of mountains. The sound, if we could hear it, would be a groan older than time itself, a voice of earth remaking itself grain by grain. In North America, the Laurentide ice sheet sprawled across most of Canada and reached deep into the United States. Beneath its weight, valleys deepened, ridges flattened, and great basins were gouged into the earth. When the ice finally melted, those basins filled with water, becoming the Great Lakes, the largest chain of freshwater lakes on the planet. Today, they are borders, highways, and homes for millions, but their origin is written in the grinding patience of the ice. In Europe, the glaciers carved deep scars into the coastlines. Norway's fjords, long, narrow inlets flanked by steep cliffs, were once valleys carved by ice and then drowned by the sea. Scotland's highlands, rugged and bare, were stripped and shaped by glaciers retreating north. Across the Alps, cirques and U-shaped valleys still mark where the ice once pressed, smoothing jagged peaks into flowing forms. To walk through these landscapes is to walk through a gallery of the glacier's art. Even where the glaciers did not reach, their influence was felt. Meltwater roared from their edges in torrents, carving river valleys and depositing layers of sediment across plains. Outwash plains stretched for kilometers, gravel and sand laid down by floods that thundered as the ice melted each summer. Lowest soils, fertile and deep, were blown by winds from the edges of glaciers, spreading across Eurasia and feeding future civilizations. The very soil that nurtured early agriculture was a gift of the ice. The glaciers also sculpted emptiness. As they advanced, they scooped out valleys and left behind hollows that later became lakes. They carved depressions where water pooled into wetlands, reshaping ecosystems for thousands of years to come. In North America, kettle lakes pocked the landscape, small pools formed by melting ice blocks stranded in sediment. In Northern Europe, entire chains of lakes trace the path of retreating glaciers. Where once was ice, there's now water. The ghosts of glaciers shimmering in sunlight. But the glaciers were not gentle artists. Their sculpting was destructive as much as creative. They scraped away forests, crushed soil, and buried land beneath moraines of stone and debris. They erased older landscapes, covering them with new ones, rewriting the story of Earth with each advance and retreat. For creatures living then, the changes were devastating. Habitats vanished beneath ice, rivers shifted course, grasslands were drowned. Yet in the destruction, new possibilities were born. When the pace of their work was beyond human time, a glacier might advance for thousands of years, grinding a valley into shape, then retreat for thousands more, leaving behind rivers and lakes. To the humans who lived then, the glaciers were eternal, immovable walls at the edge of their world. Only now, with the span of geology at our command, can we see their true motion, their sculpting of the planet across deep time. Even today, we live in the landscapes the glaciers left us. The great rivers of North America, the Mississippi, the Missouri, the Ohio, owe part of their paths to glacial floods and shifts. The fertile farmlands of China and Europe, fed by lowest soils, were carried there by winds off the glaciers. The coastlines of Scandinavia, dramatic and jagged, are the remnants of valleys carved and drowned. We are still living in the architecture of ice, still drinking from its lakes, still farming on its soils. The glaciers were the sculptors of the earth, but they were also reminders of its impermanence. The mountains they carved seemed eternal, yet they themselves melted and vanished in time. The lakes they left behind seemed timeless, yet they too will one day dry or fill. Nothing the ice created is forever, just as nothing it destroyed was forever lost. The glaciers were motion made stone, patience made visible, the hands of the earth itself reshaping its own body. To stand today at the foot of a fjord, to sail across the Great Lakes, to walk through a wide valley shaped like a U, is to stand in the shadow of that sculpting. The glaciers are gone, but their art remains. And in that art, we see not only the history of a frozen world, but the legacy of change. The Ice Age was not simply an era of cold. It was an era of creation, when the frozen sculptors carved the world we inherited, when silence itself had weight, and when time was measured in ice. Life at the edge. Ice Age was a world of extremes. At its heart, glaciers sprawled for thousands of kilometers, frozen giants pressing down upon the land. But around their edges, where the grip of ice loosened, life carved out a fragile existence. It was here, at the margins between cold and warmth, between death and survival, that the story of the Ice Age truly unfolded. The edge of the ice was a frontier, brutal yet alive, perilous yet abundant, a razor's boundary where adaptation decided fate. The winters were merciless. Snow fell and stayed, piling into drifts that hardened under their own weight. Nights were long, stretching across months, the sun little more than a pale orb that lingered low on the horizon. Cold could kill without warning. Frostbite stole flesh. Hunger hollowed bodies. Storms buried the unprepared. But life endured. Herds of mammoth and bison pressed southward in search of grazing grounds, their migrations guided by instinct, their survival dependent on movement. Reindeer gathered in vast numbers, their antlers like forests shifting across the plains, scraping snow to uncover the grasses beneath. Horses stampeded in herds across frozen steppes, hooves cracking ice to reach water. For them, the Ice Age was a test of endurance, of mobility, of living always on the move. Predators followed close behind. Packs of dire wolves coursed across the steppe, lean and relentless, their howls echoing through the night. They worked together with ruthless efficiency, testing the edges of herds, seeking the weak, the sick, the old. Lions stalked the shadows, their frames larger than the lions of today, their hunts coordinated and swift. Saber-toothed cats struck with terrifying power, their fangs plunging deep into the throats of their prey. Even the scavengers, hyenas and ravens and vultures played their role, thriving in the aftermath of the hunt. At the edge of the ice, every creature was hunter or hunted, predator or prey. And then there were humans, small bands of families, fragile compared to the beasts, yet cunning in ways no other species could match. They survived with fire, with stone, with cooperation. They learned the habits of animals, following the tracks of mammoth herds, anticipating the movements of reindeer. They built shelters from hides and bones, carving out warmth from the materials of survival. They carried with them the power of imagination, the ability to see not only what was, but what could be. A hunt planned before it began, a tool shaped before it was needed, a future imagined before it arrived. Life at the edge was not only a battle, but a cycle. Winters thinned herds, weakened the strong, cold the vulnerable. Summers brought sudden abundance. Grasses erupted from the thawing soil. Wildflowers carpeted the plains. Insects filled the air in clouds. Animals bred in this brief window, calves and cubs born into a world that would soon grow cold again. The balance was delicate. Eat enough, grow strong enough, prepare enough, or perish when the snows returned. For humans, this rhythm was everything. They stored food when they could, drying meat, saving fat, caching bones for tools. They watched the skies for signs of weather, the migrations of birds, the growth of grasses, all of it knowledge woven into their survival. At the edge of the ice, knowledge was life. Those who remembered, who passed on wisdom, endured. Those who did not vanished into the cold. But the edge was also a place of invention. Here, necessity drove innovation. Spears became sharper, thrown farther with the aid of atlatls. Fire was mastered not only for warmth, but for shaping landscapes, clearing brush, driving herds. Clothing was stitched from hides with bone needles, fitted to preserve heat in ways no other animal could achieve. Even language deepened, for cooperation demanded communication, and survival demanded the sharing of ideas. In this crucible, humanity's greatest strengths, ingenuity, adaptability, culture, were sharpened against the whetstone of ice. And yet, survival was never certain. Entire species fell when they could not adapt. The giant ground sloth, slow and lumbering, could not withstand the cold or the hunters that pursued it. The short-faced bear, though powerful, vanished when its prey dwindled. Even the great mammoths, whose herds had thundered across continents for millennia, would one day succumb to the warming world and the rise of humanity. The edge of the ice was always shifting, always demanding, always reshaping the destiny of life. To live at the edge was to live in awareness of death, but it was also to live in the presence of beauty. Imagine the sun rising over a steppe in summer, light spilling across endless grasslands, herds moving like rivers across the horizon. Imagine standing at night beneath a sky unpolluted by cities, filled with stars so sharp they cut the darkness, the Milky Way blazing like ice fire across the heavens. For humans, these sights must have stirred awe as much as fear, wonder as much as hunger. The Ice Age was harsh, but it was also magnificent, a world alive with contrasts. The edge of the ice was more than a boundary. It was a crucible. For humanity, it was the place where survival became more than instinct, where culture and imagination became tools as vital as fire or stone. It was here, at the frozen frontier, that humans became more than survivors. They became shapers of destiny. The glaciers would retreat in time, and the world would change. But the memory of life at the edge remained. In the bones buried beneath permafrost, in the art painted on cave walls, in the very shape of our species. The Ice Age did not only test life, it forged it, and at its margins, where cold and survival met, humanity found its place in the world. The thaw begins. For tens of thousands of years, the glaciers ruled, their frozen walls pressing southward, their weight grinding mountains into valleys, their silence shaping continents. But the reign of ice was never eternal. The earth, tilted on its axis, orbiting in slow cycles around the sun, lives by rhythms deeper than memory. And so, in time, the balance shifted. The great sheets of ice, which had seemed immovable, began to melt. The thaw had begun. At first it was subtle. A longer summer here, a gentler winter there. But small changes multiplied, amplified by the earth itself. Temperatures rose. Snow that once lingered through the seasons began to vanish. Glaciers, which for millennia had advanced, now faltered, their frozen fronts crumbling into torrents of meltwater. The silence of ice gave way to the roar of floods. Rivers swollen with glacial melt surged across continents, carving new valleys, drowning plains, shifting courses in days what once had taken centuries. In North America, the Laurentide ice sheet began to retreat, releasing water trapped for ages. Lakes of unimaginable size formed at its edges, freshwater seas stretching across the heart of the continent. Some were larger than modern Great Lakes combined. From time to time, ice dams holding these waters collapsed, unleashing catastrophic floods that thundered across the land, stripping soil, scattering boulders, and carving channels that can still be seen today. The scablands of the Pacific Northwest bear the scars of these floods, dry channels that once held torrents 100 times the flow of the Amazon. In Europe, the retreat of ice-exposed valleys long buried, green shoots sprouting where once only glaciers stood. Forests crept northward, reclaiming land left bare. Rivers swelled with meltwater, reshaping deltas and plains. The North Sea, once a grassland bridge between Britain and the continent, began to flood, its lowlands drowned by rising seas. Entire worlds of tundra and steppe, once walked by mammoths and hunters, vanished beneath waves. The warming transformed ecosystems as much as landscapes. The mammoth steppe, that vast belt of grassland stretching across Eurasia and North America, began to shrink. With more warmth came more moisture, and with moisture came trees. Forests advanced across the plains, shading out grasses, fragmenting the open expanses on which mammoths and bison had depended. What was once a frozen Eden of abundance became patchwork, its herds scattered, its predators starved. The giants of the Ice Age began to dwindle, their reign undone not by hunters alone, but by the slow, steady hand of climate. Humans watched this transformation with both opportunity and peril. Where glaciers retreated, new lands opened, fresh rivers teemed with fish, forests offered game. But the collapse of the great herds shook their way of life. Hunters who had followed mammoths for generations now turned to deer, boar, and smaller prey. Fishing and foraging grew in importance. Technologies adapted, and society shifted. At the same time, the flooding seas cut off ancient routes. The Bering Land Bridge, once a frozen highway between Asia and the Americas, sank beneath rising waters, severing continents once more. Doggerland, the fertile plain that connected Britain to Europe, disappeared beneath the North Sea, taking with it the camps and hunting grounds of countless bands. For those who lived there, the world itself seemed to drown. The thaw was not uniform. At times the melting paused, the climate cooled again, the glaciers surged forward once more. But the overall rhythm was unstoppable. Over thousands of years, ice that had endured for millennia retreated into the poles, leaving behind a world remade. Sea levels rose more than 100 meters, drowning coasts, reshaping continents. Islands were cut from mainlands, rivers found new courses, lakes filled basins gouged by ice. By the time the thaw was complete, Earth looked much as it does today. Yet the end of the Ice Age was also the end of an age of giants. The mammoths, the woolly rhinoceroses, the saber-toothed cats, all dwindled and vanished. Some survived longer in isolated refuges, mammoths lingering on Wrangel Island in the Arctic Ocean until just 4,000 years ago. But the great herds that had thundered across continents were gone. Their disappearance was shaped by climate, by shrinking grasslands, by floods and forests. But it was shaped too by us. Humans had grown in number, in skill, in reach. As the giants faltered, we hunted them to their end. The thaw reshaped not only landscapes but destinies. Humanity, once hunters of mammoths, turned toward new ways of life. In the fertile valleys left by retreating glaciers, soils enriched by loess and floods, people began to plant, to cultivate, to farm. Agriculture was born in the wake of ice. Villages grew, then cities. Civilization itself sprouted from the soil the glaciers left behind. In this way, the thaw was not merely the end of the Ice Age, it was the beginning of us. And so the glaciers retreated, leaving scars on mountains, lakes in their basins, fertile soils across plains. They left a world transformed, a world where forests replaced steppe, where seas replaced land, where humans replaced giants as the dominant force. The silence of ice gave way to the voices of rivers, of forests, of civilizations rising from the thaw. The Ice Age ended, but its legacy endures, written into the land, into our history, into our very bones. The glaciers are gone. The mammoths are gone. The saber-toothed cats no longer stalk the plains. The world of the Ice Age has melted into memory, its frozen silence replaced by forests, rivers, and the voices of billions of people. Yet its shadows remain. We live still in the landscapes the ice carved, drink from the lakes it left behind, plant our crops in soils it ground into being. The Ice Age has passed, but it has not left us. It is etched into the very shape of Earth. The Great Lakes, the fjords of Norway, the valleys of the Alps, the rolling plains of North America, all are monuments to glaciers that moved with patience beyond human comprehension. Every stone smoothed by ice, every ridge of moraine, every kettle lake glittering beneath the sun, is a memory of that frozen age. To walk the earth today is to walk in the footprints of ice. It is etched, too, into us. Humanity was shaped by the trials of the Ice Age. We learned to endure cold that could kill, to hunt beasts larger than ourselves, to clothe, to shelter, to imagine. We learned cooperation in culture, art, and story, because survival demanded more than strength. It demanded meaning. Around fires burning in the dark, we became more than animals. We became human. And though the glaciers have retreated, their lessons linger. They remind us that the earth is not fixed but restless, always changing, always remaking itself. They remind us that climates shift, seas rise, worlds drown and reemerge. They remind us that extinction is real, that giants can fall, that survival is never guaranteed. They remind us that we are fragile, yet also resilient, capable of shaping our own destiny. The shadows of ice stretch even into our future. As our climate warms, as glaciers melt once more, we find ourselves staring into echoes of the past. Seas are rising again. Rivers are changing course. Coastlines are drowning. The ice has retreated before, and it is retreating again. This time, not by ancient rhythms alone, but by the hand of humanity itself. To understand the Ice Age is to see the future written in its shadow. But the story of ice is not only one of loss. It is one of creation, of transformation, of life enduring in the face of cold and silence. It is the story of landscapes carved into beauty, of humans born into resilience, of a world that found balance even in extremes. The Ice Age was harsh, but it was also magnificent, a testament to the power of Earth to remake itself and to the power of life to endure. And so, though the mammoths are gone, though the glaciers have melted, their presence lingers in every valley, in every memory, in every story we tell of where we came from. The Ice Age is over, but its shadows remain. In the land, in our bones, in our imagination. We are children of ice, living in its legacy, carrying its memory into a warmer world. The silence of glaciers has faded, but their voice still whispers through the earth. And if we listen closely, we can hear it. A reminder that nothing is permanent, that everything changes, and that within change lies both danger and possibility. The Ice Age ended, but its story continues in us. Close your eyes. Imagine the world beneath ice. Hear the silence, a silence so deep it seems endless, broken only by the groan of glaciers moving, the whisper of winds over empty plains. See the horizon, not green, not soft, but vast and white, a world pared down to essentials, cold, stone, and breath. Now let yourself walk across the mammoth steppe. The air is sharp, carrying the scent of frost and grass. In the distance, herds move like shadows, mammoths with tusks curling toward the sky, bison pressing through snow, wolves pacing the edges of the hunt. You feel the rhythm of their lives, each heartbeat a negotiation with the cold, each step a defiance of extinction. Beside them walk your ancestors. Their fire glows against the dark, fragile yet unyielding. Their voices rise in story, in song, in prayer. Echoes within caves, painted visions of animals and spirits that carried them through the long night. Their survival is not separate from yours. Their breath, their endurance became your strength. Their wonder became your imagination. The ice retreats. Rivers roar. Forests spread. Seas rise. The giants fade into memory, but their presence lingers. The landscapes they shaped are still beneath your feet. The lessons they taught are still within your bones. Breathe in and feel the patience of glaciers. Slow, steady, enduring. Breathe out and feel the fire of survival. Fragile, resilient, human. The Ice Age is gone, but it is not lost. It is in the valleys and lakes, in the stories of fire and stone, in the resilience carried within you. Carry its memory, carry its silence, carry its strength, and remember, you are a child of ice, living in its shadow, shaped by its hand.